Okay, folks, a few minutes late, but I'm going to call this meeting to order. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Furtado, Goss, Hanauer Friedman, Ingram,
Present.
Locke,
Here.
Lokshin,
Here.
Michaels, Pugh,
Here.
Rodriguez, Rogers,
Present.
Sexton, Storr,
Here.
Straub,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Thorsland,
Here.
Vanich Theronot,
Here.
Wilson,
Here.
Carter, Cowart, Esri,
Here.
Farney,
Here.
Patterson.
He is here somewhere, yes. We have a quorum. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, Jenny and then Mike is the second.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to modify that and add public input.
Okay, thank you, Eric. We have a second on that? Second that from JJ. All right, a motion and a second. All in favor of amending the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, everyone in favor of approving the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, new item 3A, public participation. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Hi, my name.
State your name, sir. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Dale. I want to start off by apologizing for the other night if my anger was misplaced with anyone that didn't have anything to do with the violation that happened. I know that there's a lot of people on the board. Some of you may not have the authority to have made any decision on that, but we definitely need more ADA training for the budget, allocated within the budget, specifically and particularly the sheriff's office, the circuit clerk. They really require and can use it. I submitted that complaint of the indirect intimidation that happened. I am currently neighbors with Lieutenant Aaron Lack from the Champaign Police Department, and within a couple of days after vocalizing my complaint to Julia Reitz and Randall Rosenbaum, I had a squad car parked that was never there before. It was unmarked, just all of a sudden on my road. And it was there up until yesterday when I went into the circuit clerk's office, did more research, and I filed an IC3.gov Computer Crime Complaint Center complaint with the FBI, particularly on this matter. I'm almost certain that they were able to view it with any sort of remote monitoring software that they had installed. And let's see, I can pull that up real quick. I'll try to be quick. Some examples of that type of software, and this is from a Harvard cyber campaign playbook released in 2017, I want to say. But include VMware, AirWatch, Microsoft Intune, and JAMF. G Suite and Microsoft Outlook 365 also include an MDM service. An MDM service is a mobile device management. It can basically do everything that a person could do with the device in their hand. And I use Apple Remote Desktop for my Mac products, so I know that, they can see everything that I do. And what ended up happening, looping back to my neighbor parking his squad car out there, the second that I voiced my contentions with Chief Judge Rosenbaum, after filing that complaint yesterday, it's gone. And now there's a white Jaguar in its place. It may not be his. It could be anybody else's. There was also a van parked behind the squad car. Maybe it had a cell site simulator. Maybe they were in furtherance violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and computer tampering in Illinois. Specifically, that's what I filed the complaint on, because someone in excess of their lawful authority at the courthouse utilized that computer terminal. Yes, they maintained the computer, but that would be outside of their lawful authority. So I believe that that would violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and computer tampering if they use that to deliver to the sheriff's office. But we need to get the sheriff's office, the state's attorney's office, the circuit clerk's office trained on the ADA violations that are happening. That's all I've got for tonight. Again, I want to apologize about any misplaced anger the other night. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, starting budget presentations. First up is Regional Office of Education, Gary Lewis.
Good evening. You can sit right into, okay.
Yeah, the mic, yeah, okay, that'll work. Yeah, just keep it a few inches from you and we'll be able to hear everything you say.
There you see our ask. It's, I think it's 3% overall. What we've added at Ready is a health clinic. So we've hired a physician's assistant, and we're working with a local doctor out of Philo to be our clinic MD. So that allows us to have kids go to the doctor whenever they need to, because a lot of our kids at Ready, the alternative program, have a hard time getting to the doctor. Also, it's available to all the county schools. If they have a kid move in and they haven't had a physical yet, we can send our physician's assistant out and give them that physical right there on the spot. We can also prescribe medication. We've worked out a deal with Quest to get better, cheaper blood tests for them. Along with that, we started a culinary arts program. We hired Abdulio Escobar to be our chef. And now we had 10 kids in a summer program for culinary arts, and those 10 kids came every day, which is very unusual for our kids to especially show up in the summer. And we just now recently partnered with Prosperity Gardens. So we have hired someone that was Ann. She was at Henrik House. They ran a plot. They stopped that program. We have hired her. They're working with Prosperity Gardens, so our kids will go out and learn how to take care of those plants and things like that. We take the produce back into the school, and then Abdulio will use that produce to feed the kids. So that's kind of the things we're doing. Obviously, we serve about 26,000 students in Ford and Champaign County, and that's 16 public school districts. So any questions on the budget ask?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I just want to say, Emilio is one of my favorite chefs. He's a top flight chef in our county, so that's amazing that the kids are going to get to learn from somebody of that caliber. I also just wanted to say to you and to everybody here and to everybody from the last two nights, I know it was a heavy lift to ask all of you to do your own budget presentations and the slides and it's a little bit different than we've ever done, and y'all have done an amazing job. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Jamala.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. I just want to say that I'm super excited about the culinary program. How long did that run in the summer?
It ran for 4 weeks, so we did the month of June.
Great. Thanks. That's all I wanted.
Yep.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Thanks. I know that in previous years, the ROE has provided assistance for temporary shelter for homeless families. I've heard that as of right now that there's not funding in place for that. Do you know, is that something that's going to be funded this school year?
It should be. It comes from a homeless grant, and that was just released We're getting an email tonight that will be released tomorrow to file for the grant, to write for the grant. That grant is based out of Charleston, and then we get sub-grants, so we're waiting for that. Yeah, we worked, I don't know, I think we had almost 600 homeless referrals last year, and we did work very closely with Cunningham Township and other townships to get them put up. And honestly, we weren't supposed to go up on 3 days. We came in a couple times when those storms came in. We let the people stay for a week, and we just figured it out with money. I wasn't about ready. Neither one of us was going to put anybody out in a storm.
Great, thanks.
Anyone else? Thank you, Gary. Reddy does great work. Appreciate your work in the community. All right, extension education. Hi, Ginger.
Hi. Well, we'll see. Can you hear me now?
Yes, just just stay within a couple inches of the mic.
Okay, very good. Well, maybe. I think that'll work, right? I have a pretty loud voice, so I'm hoping that'll work. As he said, I represent University of Illinois Extension, and actually things, I'm pretty excited about things that are happening this year. As you can tell on our highlights, our grant funds, and those are the SNAP-Ed and FNEP, which are the large federal nutrition education grants, are what is listed there. And this county actually has about $1.3 million worth of grants that come from that, which makes up a lot of our budget. We are getting matched by the state now from your local dollars at about 85%, and we're caught up, which is something that we haven't been for several years. So we are actually caught up with that, which has opened up things so that we can actually hire some new educators. We're going to hire a natural resource educator this year. We're going to hire another nutrition and wellness educator. We've been heavily in the schools. We're working with a grant for the broadband access. So that's something that's actually relatively new. The other thing to highlight is the amount of volunteers that we have. And we have the value of our volunteers as almost $300,000, and that's growing. So we have master naturalists, master gardeners, 4-H. So that's a big bulk of what we give back to this community. So, questions?
Go ahead, Diane.
Real quick, do you still do that real world program, working with the high schools and giving them a?
Yes, we do. And actually, that program was revamped.
Good.
And it's going to start this year. We're
Good.
rolling it out again this year.
It was a great program.
Oh, yeah. And they've put some things in to make it even more realistic. So,
Perfect. Thank you.
sure.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Up next is Veterans Assistance Committee. We've got David Murphy, the new superintendent.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good. All right, as they said, my name is David Murphy. This is my first year at the Veterans Assistance Commission. I just started working there May 15th. So I wanted to put a couple of points out before this budget hearing took place a couple of weeks ago. The Veterans Assistance Commission Board convened, and they voted on some things that were not put into the budget pages that you might have seen in the booklet this week. So I wanted to bring those points up. They're on the slide that's up there.
David, the slide didn't get updated, but the page in your handout is.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So basically what they voted on at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, they want to hire a new admin assistant. It's a new position for the Veterans Assistance Commission office to maintain the files and answer calls, set appointments, process financial assistance packets, and other duties as necessary of an admin assistant for the office. They also expect that person to be there starting next year 5 days a week, my office hours will be changing to 5 days a week from the current 4 days a week. And that will allow me to do outreach in the community to veterans, to be able to get out to help with the other veterans in our outlying towns like Rantoul and Mahomet, the ones who maybe don't get a chance to come in and to visit the office. Also, they voted on a pay increase for me. They wanted to initially get it from where I'm currently at to about $3 more once I'm fully accredited as a veteran service officer. I'm happy to say I just passed that test, but it takes about 90 days to get fully accredited through the VA, so that'll be a few months down the road. Also, the budget that since the office started about a decade ago for financial assistance has been $80,000 a year to help our low-income veterans with rent and utilities, and it's not been changed. The $80,000 has been the status quo for the last 10 years, so they voted to increase that by 50% from $80,000 to $120,000. And because I'll be doing outreach in the community for the veterans to be able to reach me when I'm not in the office, they voted on getting me a work cell phone. So those are the highlights that happened during our meeting. And if there's any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Go ahead.
Hi. About how many low-income vets do you estimate are in our county?
So that would be a good question. Right now, we help annually about 100 through my office. It's probably about 80-something right now, but the year's not over. So I should say about 100. But again, not every veteran knows about my office yet. That's why I'm starting to do the outreach.
And when you do financial assistance, do folks need to fill out like an application for that?
Correct.
And about how much are you helping folks with at a time?
Okay, good question. So right now they're limited to $1,000 a year, but it's only $200 per month maximum. So we could help them with rent or utilities up to $200, or a combination. They can get $100 towards rent and $100 towards utilities if that's what they want. And we do help with electric, gas, or the rent, or it could be a mortgage as well. If they've fallen on hard times, lost a job or something, and need help making a mortgage payment, we would also help a couple $100 a month to help float their mortgage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jen. Jamala.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm
You're
new
welcome.
to the board as well. So
Okay.
we're in the same kind of boat. Can you tell me what kind of outreach you plan on doing?
Yeah, so right now, for example, tomorrow I'm going to be on the radio. I've been trying to get out to the radio stations and let them know that my office exists. As of 2022, fiscal year 2022, our county, according to the VA, had about 8,900 veterans, but my office in the last decade has only really seen probably less than 1,000 of them. So we have a good portion of our veterans that don't even come into the office. Now, that doesn't mean that they all don't necessarily know about my office. Maybe they do and they just don't feel the need of help. But I want to get out there to see who does and doesn't know so we can get them in there to get the help they need. You're welcome.
Stephanie.
Welcome. I'm sure you probably had to hit the ground running. One question I have is, about a week or so ago, we gave some of our American Rescue Plan Act money to a Stop the Violence program for veterans. There's a lot of community support for the program. And the reason we had sort of held that in abeyance is we were concerned, we wanted to make sure, because that money will end, after 2024, that the efforts that they're doing will continue with the logical place for those efforts to continue would be with the VAC. And one of the things that was talked about at the meeting is one of the things that they want to engage in is sort of like a needs assessment with our veterans. And they seem well positioned to do that based on the level of community support they were able to garner. Do you see that relationship, because it's a pretty sizable investment that the board is making in that sort of initiative, which is focusing particularly on mental health, is that as we work out how we're going to get TEAL to full funding, right, with the new legislation that passed, is that a relationship that you could see continuing in the future beyond the scope of this funding? What is the relationship with that group and the VAC, and how can we make sure that that investment is something that continues in the future?
Okay, to be honest, that would be a vote from the commission, and unfortunately, I'm not a voter for the commission. So that would have to be brought to them. I'm sure it will be based on the results they get over the next 2 years of that program. My example would be if they only end up helping 20 families over 2 years and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, they probably would vote against, putting a bunch more county money into that. Maybe they'll change their mind if they've helped 400 or 500 families and they see, okay, wow, this is really a big thing for us and we need to do that. But again, it wouldn't really be up to me. I'm not sure how they would view it. You're welcome.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Jeff. I saw Jeff first, so.
Hey, David, thanks for being here. Really appreciate your service, and thank you for your service as a veteran and then what you're doing for the Veterans Assistance Program. So the way I understand it, it's really two separate things. With the ARPA fund allocated for $165,000 is programmatic, addressing needs for veterans that, or in their families, that are suffering from traumatic issues. And then the Veterans Assistance Program, the VAC, is mostly geared to emergent needs like for rent or utilities or food. That's kind of how I see the two different programs. But I'm thinking, and maybe you are too, I'm thinking that the success of the ARPA dollars that were funded to kick off the pilot program for veterans to support them with mental health concerns could be a pilot that, do you think that the VAC could capitalize on? Although the charter is different, right? The charter for the VAC is subsistence funding for veterans in need. But I would think there's got to be some way where the two can somehow, staying within the bounds of the law, meld together to provide additional support for veterans that are suffering from traumatic issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I was just saying, I mean, it's not an impossible thing, but it's not happening in any other VAC currently, statewide that I'm aware of. And so since it's a new program, it's really going to be based on how it does over the next 2 years, whether the VAC board itself thinks that it's been a positive program for our community. Like, again, some of the parts of that program are offered by the VA already, so some of it is duplicate assistance, but if they're finding that it's easier to get the assistance here than going to Danville, for example, and they see that it's a better, program for them, then the VAC board may decide, yeah, this is a good thing for us, and they may try and look into that, but I'm still not even sure how the VAC board will be able to run a program like that based on the qualifications that we have in our office.
I mean, you're restricted by the law. But
Exactly.
So how many other county employees are on 4 days a week besides you?
Oh, I'm the only one that I know of.
So do you think that going from 4 to 5 is a benefit to the county?
Well, I think it's a benefit to the veterans, which is why I'm here. I think that when I come in on a Monday morning, I have several missed calls from people calling on Fridays thinking that it's a normal office hours and Monday through Friday, and they don't realize that I'm closed on Fridays a lot of times. So I think it will give me a chance to get out to see veterans more often and be more available to them to get their claims filed for disability or help them with the financial assistance.
Yeah, good point. And then so when I look at your chart, it seems like 25% of the veterans that are asking for assistance are turned down because of limited amount of money. Is that correct?
In the past, they have been. I couldn't tell you for sure going forward. A lot of that also depends on their income level. So if they're coming in and they say they're way above poverty line, they may just be looking for a couple extra $100, and they may not qualify for it because it is based on low income needs, right? So some people do get disqualified or told no just because they make $5,000 a month or something, and we're trying to help the people that are down in the 2,000 and less range mostly.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
JJ, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm the new guy on the board as well, so I've been on the board since last week, so I've got you beat by a little bit.
Okay. A little.
First question for you is, and I think you kind of answered it for Mr. Wilson, is so your office the last several years, you've used all of your assistance money at the end of the year. Your balance is down to zero. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay. The question I have for you is about the administrative assistant request. Can you tell me types of things that and I know, again, you've been there 3 months, but what types of things are you not able to do that having this person is going to impact? It just seems that you've only been there 3 months.
Sure.
How do we know we need to add a full-time employee that, quite frankly, we don't have the money for?
Great question. So what I do know is the history of the person who was in the job before me, was there for 10 years, and a lot of things he wasn't able to get accomplished on his own, like the outreach. That's the reason why a lot of the veterans in our community don't know I exist, because he was a lot of times locked to the office. And when he wasn't in the office, then veterans would be upset that he's not available. So by having an admin assistant to take care of the paperwork and take care of veterans that come in that are looking for assistance, they can set appointments. The admin assistant would be able to set appointments, and then we wouldn't have a veteran not being assisted. Also, by me doing the outreach, I'm expecting a lot. I've already had an influx of veterans, just so you know. Like, since I started 3 months ago, I've already had a lot of veterans coming in saying, we just didn't even know you existed. We heard from a friend. And, so I'm letting people know by word of mouth, and I'm trying to get the word out at the VA. I left my card up there. I'm getting calls like crazy now from the VA. So yeah, that's why I would want them in the office, because right now the veterans are just not getting the idea in their head that they think that I should be there, 8 to 4, my office hours, no lunch, no nothing, So that's why I realized that there's a need for the assistant. You're welcome.
Diane?
Just a quick question. On a monthly basis, do you have to turn people away because you lack funds?
Oh, so we do a budget. Yeah, we have, yes. To answer your question, especially the beginning of the year, because we do a monthly budget for the whole year. So right now we are around $6,600 a month that we can help. So if we get over 33 veterans who need assistance, the rest of them have to be told, we have to wait till next month and see if there's funds available. Because if we gave it all at once, we may not have the money there for the end of the year.
Stephanie?
The part of the proposal that I like the most is the more direct assistance to the veterans. Are you anticipating with this additional money that you are going to serve more veterans, or are you anticipating upping the amount? Are you going to leave the amount, what is it, $200 a month?
It's $1,000 a year, $200 a month, correct.
So are you going to leave it at that level and hopefully assist more, or are you thinking about upping the level? Have you all made that decision with that funding yet?
So that's still up in the air for the board, I think, to discuss. I did talk to the secretary of the board about it recently, and there was some talk about maybe raising the amount to $250 a month and making it like $1,250 a year. But again, the board is going to have to vote on that to see if they think that they'd rather help more veterans with a little, the same amount of dollars, or maybe slightly more veterans with a little bit more money.
And then I think this next question is probably for you two. What is our typical administrative assistant? And if you don't know, if you could give this to me after the meeting, job classification. Do you know what, like, is it a J? Like what, you know what I mean? Is it a E, an A, an L? What?
For a non-bargaining, non-union position, it's probably going to be anywhere from an F to H.
Do you know what the range is of that?
Straight salary would probably be between 35 and 45, and then throw.
So I guess it's going to be more than 50.
Yes.
Yes, because the benefits then is a third on top, right? So probably, just so like as we're thinking about this total proposal is 108, and it's probably more like 115, 120. Just so like, I just want to make sure we as a board understand what the commitment is. I just, that seemed low to me for salary and benefits. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page.
Anyone else? Excuse me. Go ahead.
Thank you for being here. Still new to the board myself too here. What services does the VAC provide other than the monetary support, and do you guys link to other resources out in the community?
Did you ask if we lend to other resources or
link?
Link. Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Yeah, so besides the financial assistance, we file claims, disability claims, which is actually going to eventually be our primary goal, because if we have someone that's on low income but has disabilities, we want to get them claimed, those disabilities, through the VA. so that their income can be raised. Because if their income is raised, they won't need the assistance from the taxpayers. They're going to have federal funding instead, which is our ultimate goal. But for now, until we can get all those claims processed, it's just me right now in the office. And we have one guy that comes in right now, Brad Gould, who used to have my position. He comes in on Wednesdays to help out veterans for just 4 hours a week right now. As soon as my accreditation goes through, then I will be able to do it, the full-time all work week. But primarily we're a liaison between the VA that help the veterans file their claims or make sure they get the appointments they need. We do talk with the VA on behalf of the veterans sometimes to get them appointments up for environmental health, or like for Agent Orange is a good example. That's been a big thing lately. So we do that as well. Also work with the Salvation Army to help out with our homeless vets population. We try to get them like a liaison with HUD-VASH through the VA in Danville to make sure that they get them housed as quickly as possible. We also help out with families of deceased veterans that will come in and say we need burial benefits or we need help with something that our family didn't realize existed, and that's what we do. We just help them find those benefits that are out there for them. You're welcome.
Further questions, comments? Seeing none. Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Planning and zoning. Thank you, John.
Good evening, Board. Okay, so we're a small office. Personnel is our biggest cost. And in revenue, what's on the slide for FY 2023 was the budgeted amount, which included $174,000 for the Baywa Solar Farm down by Sydney, which hasn't happened, so we haven't actually gotten that money. We're now budgeting that for FY 2024. Normally, the FY 23 budget, well, the projected budget now is about $90,000, which is still about twice of what it was back in 22. And that increase is, normally it's a big increase, and that's due to all the small solar arrays you see going up everywhere. They're literally going everywhere, and they have really helped our revenues. Any questions?
Hi, John.
Go ahead.
I've been zoning adjacent for something like 16 or 17 years, I guess. I'm going to ask that question that got asked another night or so ago. I see that you list you're trying to recruit a second zoning officer and a planner, or is that one position?
No, it's two.
Two. Outside of that, if you could get anything you want, because we had unlimited money, what would be like your top priority to help the office be more efficient? Not to put you on the spot, but you're on the spot now.
Our office needs another attorney.
Okay, that
To help with
sounds like a
enforcement
very
cases.
reasonable thing. And then, yeah, and I think Matt Bannock, when he was here the other night, said that they would love a real estate sort of.
And obviously, that wouldn't be in our office, that would be in the state's attorney's office, but
Okay,
we need more legal support.
that sounds like a very reasonable thing. So, thank you.
Stephanie?
I also just want to add, there was also a hope of when some of the ARPA funds come back and we're reallocating, purchasing some software for planning and zoning to begin some more efficient documentation processes. So when you hear about that later on, don't be surprised.
So Baywa's going to happen in 2024?
That's what I'm told, and they did get their necessary approvals recently at ELUC. I don't think they'd be doing that if they weren't planning on it.
All right.
And in fact, they've made contact about another phase.
Congratulations. You've been working on, I don't know, I feel like that's been in your court for as long as I've been on this board. So congratulations. That's awesome.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
Hi. I had a question about the complaints. You list your violations and your complaints, and then you have resolved complaints and violations. When complaints are resolved, does that mean they had merit, or does that mean any complaint that comes in is investigated and then it's resolved as either unfounded or there's an actual actionable?
It means both.
It means both.
If we inspect and find out that's not really a valid complaint, Well, and if we can do that quickly, we don't even count it. But normally, we can't get right out on a complaint, so we log it. And then when we get there, we determine now, is this really an issue or not? And most times it is.
Okay.
People generally don't complain about a property if there isn't something that they want to complain about. So anyhow, it's actually both.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you for being here. So, now that your biggest wish list is to have another attorney, not in your office, but someone else's office, what's the consequence of not having that individual? What happens?
There are at least 10 properties around the county, well, more than 10. There's 10 locations around the county where neighbors are having to live next to generally industrial type uses in the rural area, and they're not supposed to be putting through that. But people start these illegal businesses, and we finally find out about it. Generally, they do at least try to go through the ZBA, but many times they find out, oh, the ZBA isn't really willing to prove what I want to do. And then it becomes a legal enforcement issue. And it really taxes what the state's attorney is capable of doing at this point. We get good help when we get good help from the state's attorney's office, but there's just more than they can actually handle. And literally, there's at least 10 locations around the county right now where residents are having to put up with illegal businesses, quite illegal businesses, noisy, dirty, impacting property values. And I talk to these folks like once every 3 months because they call in to say, what's the latest? And almost always, all I can say is, I'll check with the state's attorney and see. And I don't mean to be talking bad about the state's attorney because they only have so many attorneys for these civil cases.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to add, and again, not saying disparaging the state's attorney's office, but would it be safe to say, John, that to a degree, these types of cases that your office brings to them aren't necessarily the top of the pile? They get a little more down in the pile as far as first come. I mean, the ones that they handle first. I mean, not that they don't have merit and that they want to get to them and get them resolved, but do they somewhat tend to get kind of shuffled down the stack just a little bit? Because, I mean, ultimately, it's not a life or death situation. It's a life quality, yes, but it's not like truly life and death and stuff like that. And again, not meaning that they aren't doing the absolute best they can.
For example, this past year, the state's attorney's office asked us to prioritize all the cases that we had forwarded to them. And that was a real challenge because we talked to the neighbors for each of those. And now we're going to recommend some are more important than others. And literally, so many of them are just plain illegal uses. It's hard to say which one actually deserves first attention. But they are, as a group, our worst cases.
Further question, Jamala.
So at the state attorney's office, it's my understanding that there are 3 civil attorneys. Do all 3 civil attorneys help with handle your complaints, or is there one that's assigned to you? Did they tell you the reason why they needed you to prioritize the cases? Or?
Well, I think they just wanted our opinion about which were the most egregious cases.
Okay.
We work with one primarily.
Okay.
Although Matt Bannock, we also work with Matt off and on as necessary. So I can't really talk about the internals other than we have one principal attorney that we work with.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's very safe to say that the prioritization is because they do not have the capacity to handle all of the cases. Like, that's just a simple fact, so.
More questions? Okay. John, you going to talk about your solid waste now?
Yes. Okay, solid waste. Every year, the revenues to expenditure deficit is there on solid waste. The revenues are primarily from our solid waste or trash hauling licenses, and we had a drop in those in '23. There was a lot of mergers, and some of the companies ended up not getting as many licenses as they had gotten in previous years. So our revenues are down. The expenditures remain pretty constant. The expenditures are financing the 2 residential electronic collection events every year and paying the county share for the household hazardous waste collection event that IEPA provides. And we get a lot of demand for all of those programs. Costs are apportioned between the county, the cities, and then we even ask the villages to pay a share based on population. And every year we spend more than we take in. Last year for the FY23 budget, a $10,000 ARPA contribution was included. That $10,000 basically covers the losses for a given year. And so with that in mind, at the end of FY24, the solid waste fund balance is going to be around $8,100, and our costs every year are about $10,000. So FY25 is looking pretty difficult at this point.
Go ahead, Aaron.
It's safe to say, is it not, John, that while you may think that like the electronics, the demand would ultimately some point in time drop off, that's not the case. It's staying consistent, if not increasing, but it's at the least staying consistent, and that there is the demand, because we fill the semis up, and I'm at the household waste. That's somewhat different because that's, to me, it is a little bit, because that's paints and stuff, and that stuff people are always like, well, I don't know it's paints, but anyway, that's stuff that's more continually generated. Electronics, you'd think, okay, TVs, you'd maybe hold on to them longer, and eventually all the old cathode ray tubes and the tube TVs and stuff would be gone, but demand is just still out there.
Well,
So
I think the flat panel TVs exceed the cathode ray TVs now in the recycling. It's amazing how many we get, how many huge ones we get. Electronics are a fact of life. There's always going to be a need to get rid of electronic devices. And on the household hazardous waste, that's actually what we get more calls on throughout the year. People finally decide they want to deal with that stuff in their garage, and they call us, and all we can say is, well, we'll put you on the list for April. We'll let you know when we do the one event in the year.
Dr. Storr?
I assume that you have a cordial working relationship with Champaign County Environmental Stewards. And I know that they're trying to develop a near year-round household hazardous waste. And I'll just mention that I've been told that one of the biggest sorts of things that happens is when there's a death in the family and the family goes through the basement and garage and go, oh my gosh, what the heck is all this? And so I hope that we'll be able to kind of going forward find a way to continue to provide this important service.
Yeah, the environmental stewards are working on a proposal for that year-round facility. They have begun discussions with the city public works offices to try and fathom whether they would be in support. So if things work out, we may even be bringing that forward to the board as part of next year's budget.
I happen to be on that board. And we did just buy a building. So the building was bought thanks to the ARPA money. I believe Saline, it's over in a industrial area where there's some recycling going on right now. So the property has been bought, looking at putting up a building. And the thought is trying to do something maybe monthly or bi-monthly to start, and trying to work with federal funds also on that. So, and the other two, the city of Champaign and Urbana are involved. The Village of Rantoul has also been notified for that. And I know this isn't the time or place, but it couples into that. And for all of you in this room, Susan Monty is the director. And if anybody knows anything about recycling, it's Ms. Monty. And so there is an awesome collaboration. So that will go forward.
It's Saline Court, which is off of North Lincoln Avenue.
There you go.
That's
Thank you.
correct. Yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you for bringing up Susan, Diane. You're used to seeing Susan in this role, and I just wanted to thank John for, I don't know if taking over is the right word, or having this given to you. But I've watched, John work with this additional task quite well. The events went well this year, and that's appreciated. As everyone has said, it seems to be an endless need. It's really nice to hear that they have a building coming, and I'm glad that we had that opportunity with ARPA money to do that. And I know that if there's a county role that runs through your office with Susan, that it will go very smoothly. So thank you very much.
Stephanie.
I like to just make sure everybody's on the same page. So just so in case you forgot this, or this happened before quite a few of you were on the board, I think we allocated $650,000. How we did it was we gave every district about $500,000 for water, making sure our water is safe. And one of our thoughts was if you dump a bunch of hazardous waste somewhere, it'll eventually end up in our groundwater. And so all of the urban districts, we kind of pulled our money into several projects, and one of them was the $650,000 that we put towards this project. And Susan, we gave her a little bit of money, that group, not just Susan, but that group, a little bit of money to do some of the scoping and planning. So I'm really excited. And Diane, since you're on the board, please make sure you take pictures so we could put it in our county ARPA report.
JJ.
Thanks, John, for being here. Question for you on the trash hauling fees. Is it a set fee that we charge like for each truck or something like that? And then how long has it been since we reviewed those fees and maybe looked at an increase to that?
It is a set fee per truck. The fees were adjusted about 3 years ago. If I'm recalling correctly, now it costs $35 per truck per year, which seems like a small amount. But when you're in business, there's no such thing as a small increase. So even if we doubled those fees, we would still have a revenue to expenditure deficit. We're not going to make it up on those fees. We should increase those fees on a reasonable basis to make sure that it's remaining reasonable. That would be up to the board. But it was 3 years ago when we last increased them.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we've been over time drawing on this fund balance as the county's contribution to the program. So once this fund balance is depleted, whatever the future of REC or HHW looks like is going to be a contribution that will need to come from the county general fund.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Board of Review.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. The Board of Review's largest budget item is salary. That increased 4% for 2024. Our overall budget, however, only increased 0.5%. And that's because 2 items that we had in order for the Board of Review members to get our CIAO designation don't apply. So our training budget decreased substantially. And overall, our budget's pretty stable. Any questions?
Not seeing any. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Paul is already moving up. Supervisor of Assessments.
Hello, can you hear me? So short.
Okay, I wanted to give you an update on the True Roll project. That slide is a little bit behind. We're at 5.3 million that we've found with exemptions. This is a project that ARPA funds paid for. It's a software that helps us find unqualified exemptions in the county. So we've removed about 700. New construction was down a little bit from last year. I believe it was around 120 million, but we had two big projects that were completed on campus, the core and the hub. So that's the reason for the drop. My budget is down a little bit for publications, about 4,500, and also budgeted was for the True Roll project, so that's been taken out. So expenses are down about 30,000 overall. Anybody have any questions?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Not a question, but a comment. It's really exciting to see that True Roll number and like an immediate return on that ARPA investment. So thank you for researching and asking and getting it done.
It's something I think we should probably try to do every 3 years or so.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the auditor's office. Hi, George.
Hello, Steve. Good evening, Board. The auditor's budget does not reflect much change year to year, and it maintains its character of being between $400,000 and $500,000 a year. I have 3 highlights on there that might be of interest. The expenditures for the auditor's office used to be 97% salary. That's gone down to 94% only because the 3% difference is that the line item for recurring bank services is now in the auditor's office. The second highlight that I have indicates where we get our revenue from. The auditor's salary gets apportioned out per transaction so that we get a per transaction cost. But then the general corp, of course, doesn't pay for those transactions, but independent funds like mental health and RPC do pay. So that's where the revenue comes from. We used to get a cut, if you will, from control pay, where vendors would essentially use the credit cards and then we'd get 1/3% back. Now that we've got the new ERP system, we're able to relieve our vendors of that cost. Of course, we don't get our little fraction, but we're happy to lower the overall cost to our mostly local vendors. That reflects what little change occurs in my office. I think the budget change is about 4.25%, which aligns very closely with the salary increase from last year.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
So RPC, we do charge RPC for the auditor services. Is that accurate?
They've got their allocated share for the audit as well.
So, because we had a conversation with this, when RPC was here yesterday about the state's attorney, and we don't charge for the state's attorney. How is it determined which services that the county provides that we charge back to RPC and which ones we don't? Because
Overall?
Yeah. I mean, and that might not be a you question. I just am curious because when you said that was like the opposite of what we heard about the state's attorney's office. So this is actually the first time I've ever actually thought about this. I'm just curious, like how, is it just historic, those relationships? Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, well, state's attorneys, of course, within general corp, so we don't worry about them. RPC has pass-through funds, so we do think it's fair to charge them for transactions.
Oh, no, let me be clear. We don't charge RPC for state's attorney, but we do charge them for your service. So that was,
I see.
Yeah, so I was just curious, like,
Stephanie?
how that contour works.
I believe that there's a statutory obligation for the state's attorney to represent RPC.
Okay. I've got 2 former auditors on the board. Such a friendly audience. All right, thank you.
Accordingly, I would expect some questions. No?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, George. Okay, next up is our treasurer's office.
Good evening, everyone. Test, test.
Yep. As long as you stay within an inch or two, you'll be just great.
Yeah, but then I gotta have George's mouth was here. But okay, sorry. Sorry, I apologize. So, anyway, I'm joking, George. Sorry. Bring it up. So I have 5 funds that I'm going to be talking about. Starting off with the general fund. As some of you were on the board, I think, and know about the fiscal year 19 great spending of our automation fund. Unfortunately, we're still actually paying for our professional services out of the general fund because that tax automation fund is still unhealthy. I'll talk a little bit more about where I think that we might actually have to think of a different way to kind of shore up that fund, just because we're only increasing it by small increments, at least since I've been here, to try and get it back to where it needs to be. A little bit more on that once I get to the automation fund. The penalty revenue that I decreased for previous year because we were trying to work on that automated notification for property owners didn't work out. The vendor that we wanted to go with wasn't able to do things the way that I wanted it to be done in order to make sure that everybody was taken care of. And these notifications got out to the residents. So we had to dial that back. Hence the reason why you see an increase in the revenue, because we're going back to, okay, because we don't have that notification, we're expecting the totals to be back around where they were prior to, until we can actually implement that automation. We're gonna maintain it at the roughly $700,000 of revenue. I am requesting an additional full-time person, specifically focused on the collector, banks, and that coordination and our vendor coordination within the office. Of course, they'll have the same other responsibilities of collector and treasury pieces, whatever that everyone in the office has. But the reality is that the amount of time that it takes to get through most of, specifically the collector side of things, or whatever, is it's more labor intensive. And I think, unfortunately, it's because of the move. Okay, we have DevNet, and then we move to a new finance system. So unfortunately, we're kind of caught wavering without an actual financial system. So we're doing things mostly on spreadsheets. So to kind of correct that, I do need to have another person regardless, because considering the similar sized treasurer's offices, when you think of the number of parcels, the number of non-business entities that we have to interact with, it just is, it'll make for a more sustainable office for whoever comes afterwards if we have that additional person to spread the love, as opposed to saturating individuals with tasks. I'll allow you to ask any questions if you have any.
Questions? Go ahead, Aaron.
This might be more for Tammy and or Michelle. Is that position in this? I didn't believe so. I'm just asking because I didn't remember seeing it. So
when I had a conversation with them, whatever, Michelle explained to me, whatever, hey, we won't be able to get that looked at until September. So I'm like, okay, I'll wait till September. So be it.
Just checking. Thank you.
No worries.
Anyone else?
Questions? Okay.
Hearing none?
Next item, working cash fund. Again, this is a fund that you can borrow from, pay back, that kind of deal, whatever. Hasn't been really used, but again, we're required to have it, so it's still here. If you have any questions. Next, please. Okay, so tax automation fund. As you can see from the totals that are listed there, there's been barely movement from this year and what we're expecting next year, just because the reality is that when we had those other vendor services and those charges actually in the automation fund, any overages, the less we paid these vendors for these different services, the more that fund would shore up. So we're sitting at about this, not too far off from where we started, because we've moved all of those services, vendor services, publication, things like that, to the general fund because that fund was depleted. But unfortunately, it's not going to get healthy because it was almost incentivizing not paying full price for things. So now we have it in the general fund, so the automation fund doesn't get the benefit of us actually spending less, unfortunately. I mean, we still give money back to the general fund, but it goes to the general fund versus going to this automation fund that's supposed to be used for paying for our computers and things like that. Right now, fortunately, we actually borrowed from the general fund to actually pay for, or sorry, not the general fund, capital asset replacement fund, sorry, the capital asset replacement fund to pay for the computers that we'll have installed this year. The reality is if we continue doing this the way that we're doing it, we're not going to shore up this fund. So I have ideas, but again, they're not fleshed out, but this is something to consider as we move forward. So, and like I was saying, because we actually pay for part-time staff out of this fund, each year it seems like we're going to be, okay, this money in, this money out to pay for staff. So there's no getting it healthy the way that it's working right now. Any questions?
Stephanie?
Two questions. Are those part-time staff usually like in the tax collection? Is that when they come in, the part-time
Yes,
staff?
they come in for a tax collection. I will say that one of the part-time staff that we had this year actually stayed a little bit longer because there were some other issues that actually needed to be fleshed out. But normally it's just during the height of the season.
I know this isn't the normal order of things, but could we get the, I do think it would be beneficial for the board to have like the full landscape of staffing requests. Could we get the new position request justification and have it added to the chart? With
Okay, that's fine.
Is that doable?
So again, like I have the job description is mostly fleshed out, but I can have it to you probably by the end of the week.
Okay.
No worries.
I think that would just be helpful so we have the full landscape and scope of what's out there.
Okay.
Stephanie, just for clarification, are you asking for the new position request form to be
Yes.
completed? Do you have that?
I started it, but again, like I said, when we actually had our meeting, I had a placeholder for it, but there's still more details that need to be added to it.
And while we're doing that, if I know we usually like have all of it ahead of time, but while we're doing that, can we also go ahead and get the I know it's not so much a request as a reality, but can we get the admin assistant for the Veterans Affairs on? I don't know that I necessarily need the form, but I would like one chart with all, do you know what I'm saying? So that we fully understand what all of the new position requests are. So could we add the Veterans Affairs as well to this chart?
As long as we all understand that I'm guessing at the number.
I completely understand.
Okay.
That has not gone through any, yes. Yes, that would be fine.
Okay.
But I think that guess would be more specific than the $50,000 we got on the chart. So that would be helpful.
Okay.
But also for yours as well, because this chart has like all the benefits and everything
Gotcha.
spelled out, just so we can, put it into conversation with the other requests that we've received.
Gotcha.
Any other questions on automation for? Go ahead, JJ.
Thanks for being here. If you were to get the new full-time employee, would that eliminate your need for the part-time help?
It would decrease how
Okay.
long I would have to have them, but it wouldn't eliminate it because again, the amount of processing that takes place in that office, we're still doing roughly a quarter of like the processing in office, even though we have vendors online as well as a lockbox. And the lockbox that we have now is way better than what we had previously. So there's some flexibility, but we would still need those individuals.
Great.
And probably more so because of again, our office, there's 5 full-time staff members and an insane number of residents coming in on a daily and calling often.
Yep.
24/7 pretty much it feels like. So there would still be a need to have another body to help take some of those tasks away from other individuals.
That was somewhat of a trick question. I already knew the answer. and
Okay.
yet
Yep, I'm like,
I can tell you
it's all
that
good.
office has needed an additional person for
a
at
long
least
time.
10 years.
Yep. Hopefully we get it. We'll see. Okay. More questions? All right.
Chris?
Would it, some people pay their bills in person, and some people pay through their bank and have automatic draws and so forth. Is there a savings in having the automated payments, or is it cost just about as much to do those? And I ask this because, some places are charging a fee if you do things in person as opposed to having an automated,
So I will say that with those the online payments and things like that, where there are fees associated. So people are paying for that convenience. Paying at the collector bank, there's no charge. Paying in the office, there's no charge. Paying through the lockbox, there's no charge. So realistically, we've managed, and realistically, we shouldn't be getting too much as far as revenue other than just what we're getting from interest and things like that, or late payments. So the way that it works right now is that if a person comes in and pays with a check or sends a check in the mail or something like that, or whatever, they don't pay an additional fee. But the automated services, there will always be a fee associated. And I feel like I would be remiss in not telling you guys or whatever that the new vendor we're considering actually taking on for those payments, there will be a slight increase in credit card payments, but there will be decreases in EFTs and ACHs, or EFTs, and then the ACHs that we've been doing in the office, and we're up to about an insane amount. Those will end up moving to our vendor, so that will be one less thing that will cause us headaches each time we're actually pulling taxes from individuals.
Jenny?
Do those fees go to the vendor though, and
Yep.
not
All to the vendor.
So we're not making anything.
Nope,
off
we're not
of-
making money
yeah,
off of those
okay.
things.
Anyone else? Okay.
Next, property tax interest.
Yes.
Okay, so this is like, we call it the sale and error fund, basically. Because when we actually have, usually it's administrative sale and errors that we have to do because for some reason or other, something along the process, basically between one of the county offices, we can request sale and errors for parcels being in bankruptcy and things like that. Some, to a certain extent, there's a payment may have come through and for some reason it was not showing where it should have, paid to the wrong parcel or something like that. So we have this fund that basically helps with paying for the interests that we'd have to pay to a tax buyer if for some reason I had to declare administrative sale and error. So that's what this fund is. At the end of the year, after it gets down to that 377 and change, the rest of that money goes into the general fund. So this one, working cash, and just the general fund all basically sweeps funds back to you guys once we're all done. Any questions?
You're down to one.
Game on. So last but not least is a relatively newly established indemnity fund, tax indemnity fund. Initially, so the way that this is supposed to work or whatever is that we actually collect these funds during tax sale when we're selling parcels and things like that, or someone's picking up sub-taxes and things like that. They'll actually charge, it's $20 usually, that goes into this to help offset the costs of if we have a judgment in court that requires us to pay out a previous a property owner that may have lost their property because of one reason or another. The statute is a little bit, it allows for a lot of room for someone to actually request things. So we have this fund to actually pay out individuals if it's necessary. The court order is required. It's not like a, hey, I'm just going to give you money to help you out kind of deal. We've had two thus far, one settlement, one actual court case. But something to keep in mind, once this is depleted, there's going to be a possibility, it's more likely than not that once this is depleted, there will be a move for someone potentially, or there's a possibility of someone potentially trying to request funds through the tort fund. So, possibility, let's put it out there. Any questions?
I don't see any more.
Come on.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, folks. Have a nice night.
Next is County Clerk and Recorder. Mr. Ammons.
All right, good evening, everyone. First, before I get started, I wanted to take a minute to thank you, Tammy. When we first came into this office, there was a lot to do and a lot to learn in a very quick turnaround, and you have always been extremely patient and professional with us, walking us through this process to make sure that we understood it to the best of our ability. And I just wanted to thank you publicly for everything you've done. You've never asked me to change who I am. We may not agree all the time, but we find a way to stay professional and to keep things moving. It's going to a huge void, you leaving for sure, but we wish you the best in your next endeavor. Thank you so much for everything. Appreciate it. So the first fund, you all, good evening, everybody. The first fund is our general fund, and some of the highlights show that in 2024, the office will have 2 elections. We will have a primary and a general election. Our FY 2024 budget reflects the cost of compliance with state mandates for election administration. For the 2024 general election, there is a possibility that the county clerks will be able to mail ballots to all active registered voters. If this change occurs, we believe that we have most of the funding in our budget to make this work, but we may require a budget amendment at the end of fiscal year 2024. The county clerk's office is looking ahead to digitization of the records in the clerk and recorder's office to create revenue streams while protecting archived documents. The project is almost complete, and Fiddler's program for Vital Records Apex will be implemented this October. That project was paid for by ARPA funding. In FY 2023, we have a resolution before the board in September to allow the office to collect a $3 flat fee for notary services. This will hopefully offset some of the revenue the office lost once the Secretary of State took over notary commissions. For FY 2024, we are asking the board for additional funding for the capital equipment line for a high-speed scanner, which would allow us to count ballots a lot faster during our audits or our, what do we call them? Basically, the post-election audit is what it boils down to, the retab. So the county board's commitment of $835,675 for election equipment was completed with the $42,535 budgeted in FY 2023. The request for the high-speed scanner would be to retain the $42,535 and add an additional $50,000. So that's the fund for the clerk side, the general fund. Are there any questions?
If we waited until if we took the 42,535 and moved it to 2024 and added the 50, would that give you enough time to get if we didn't order it till 2024, to get that high-speed scanner in before the election?
It would be tight,
Okay.
but if we ordered it, I believe, early enough in January, I think we should have time to get it set up.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
JJ.
Hello, sir. How are you?
What's going on, JJ?
Good to see you. So your scanner, I'm very interested in it. Having worked in that office, a high-speed scanner is essential. The ones we had when I was in that office several years ago, they didn't work well. I'm assuming you've seen these scanners in action in other places and know that we're getting something that'll be a piece of equipment that'll actually work.
So we've done quite a bit of digging into this to try to follow the best practices or who has the best experience with these. So we have talked to several different clerks, and I can't say any of this equipment is perfect, but for what the purpose that we need it for, especially with vote by mail increasing the way that it is, right now, if we get audited and they choose a location like Brookings and we have 3,000 ballots in that DS200, then we're going to spend about 10 hours putting each one of those ballots back through one at a time, where a high-speed scanner will have, I think they said 100,000 done in 30 minutes or something like that. So yes, it is an essential piece of equipment, especially as vote by mail increases for our elections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny.
My question was on the possible state mandate for vote by mail ballots. I assume that if they do mandate that they're not contributing any funds towards making that happen. So
Of course, the state's going to send us about $1 million.
So I guess that's probably something that is safe to assume that we should hold funds for, just in case.
Absolutely.
And then, I guess the scanner, that made me think too, with the rate that people expect results from elections, with the number of vote by mail ballots increasing, I know that would also increase the speed with which we would be able to call elections for the county as well, so that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving to the recorder side, some of the highlights. While this year has also seen a decent housing boom, things have slowed down for recording of deeds and documents. In FY 2023, legislators in the General Assembly increased the RHSP fee, which in turn increased the recording fees by $9. That is the Rental Housing Support Program, is what RHSP stands for. Unfortunately, Champaign County will not see an increase in revenue due to the structure of this program. So I'm actively involved in helping create an oversight committee and ensuring the program is more equitable, because right now the majority of the money collected goes to Chicago area counties. There's been quite a bit of information shared about this in Tazewell County. We had a big press conference and an event to share with the public how much of the money is going to the Chicago areas and how much money we have put in as counties versus how much we have received back to help our counties. So hopefully there will be a change in this structure in the coming year. Also, we are pleased to announce that we have interns back at the Clerk and Recorder's Office. One of the first initiatives they are working on in the Recorder's Office is the Restrictive Covenant Project. This means they will be looking through recorder subdivision plats and archives to see where we can amend the language to the restrictive covenants. In the coming months, we will be providing updates and forming an advisory committee on these efforts, and we hope to have the support and perspective of Member Rodriguez on this. Oh, she's not there, right? All right. With this, because this is something that we have been discussing for quite some time. Yes.
So first, I really appreciate your work on the trying to get that money back to our county. Wasn't aware of this until you came, I think, to our caucus and informed us. And I mean, I forget how much you said you think we've taken out of the county since this fund has started,
I don't
like
have it.
400,000 or something.
It was
like
a
that.
pretty significant amount, and we have received nothing, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, and if our folks are paying those fees, it should be going to rental assistance in our community, and we know we could use rental assistance in our community, so I appreciate your effort on that. And I know this restrictive covenant project was something that was important with Mr. Ingram when he was in that office, and I'm really excited to see that it's continuing, and I think it's a great opportunity for interns, so thanks for that.
Thank you. All right, so also the surcharge is pretty straightforward. It's a pass-through. The County Clerk Surcharge Fund was established by the County Board pursuant to Vital Records Act 410 ILCS 535/1. The fund balance goal is zero, as this is strictly a pass-through fund. This fund is a zero-sum fund to account for the payments to the state for certificate surcharges. So in our grant fund here, the highlights are the Election Assistance and Accessibility Grant Fund is used as a repository for revenues associated with various grants, and it is utilized to offset the cost to the county for administering elections. For FY 2024, grant awards total $214,677. The IVRS grant, which is the state grant, totals $184,677, plus $30,000 from the PPA ADA grant, which is a federal grant. The anticipated reimbursements will be for voter registration program, annual licensing, postage and printing for voter registration cards, temp staff, Wi-Fi connections at polling places for early voting, and election day. Delayed reimbursements from previous years will be received by the end of FY 2023. And as a reminder, the grants are on a different fiscal cycle than the county. Grant cycle for State Board of Election grants are from July 1 to June 30th and cross 2 fiscal years. Any questions on the grants?
I would just like to commend your office for pulling in all this grant money. There is so much money out there that is being underutilized or unutilized, and you guys are on it. Keep up the good work. Get that money.
Thank you very much. So, automation highlights for us. The automation fund for the clerk side will again be used to supplement office operations, but the long-term objective is to build a sufficient fund balance so that the automation fund can be used for large-scale capital and technology purchases. This will help improve operational efficiency and services, including elections. The automation fund is funded by surcharges, and the fund balance has been spent down over previous years to supplement general corporate fund office operations and personnel. As far as the recorder side, the automation fund makes possible various new software products that improve our efficiency and accuracy. In FY 2023, we changed to automated billing for Laredo subscribers, which made the process of paying for the subscription more streamlined. This has also increased our revenue we are receiving from Laredo and Monarch subscribers. From January to July, we have taken in a little over $113,000. And that is it.
Questions?
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Okay. Information technology, MC.
All right, can you hear me? No, a little bit, yes, maybe?
Yeah, as long as you just keep close to the mic.
What's that?
Just stay close to the mic and we'll
I'll
hear you
stay
well.
close. Hopefully this is good. All right. Good evening, board. Nothing overly exciting with IT. Single budget on a single slide. This budget largely covers personnel, but also some things such as our countywide copier contract, funds for repairing or replacing any hardware that unexpectedly fails, etc. Of note, I did work to keep the budget as flat as possible. Hopefully that is appreciated. The exciting things for IT are actually funded through CARF, which I believe Tammy went over last night. So the things on the slide are actually not from IT's budget. They're either from ARPA or CARF. But again, I really didn't have much to talk about in our budget, and I thought that these were noteworthy, so wanted to touch upon them. Some things that I did not put on the slide that I wanted to make you aware of. Didn't put them on the slide because they are occurring now and through the end of the year versus 2024. But IT right now is working on 3 larger projects. The first is replacing the majority of our networking infrastructure throughout all of our buildings. We have already procured that equipment, have everything programmed and configured, and we'll be moving forward with deploying that starting Saturday, trying to take advantage of the holiday weekend while folks are out of the office. Current plans have that being completed by mid next month. Second, we are moving forward with a project to replace all of the private fiber that is running throughout our buildings on East Campus. So these fiber lines are providing network connectivity and phone connectivity to all of the buildings north of Brookins. We are wrapping up a RFP in that regard. I will actually be in front of you again next month with the chosen vendor and a contract, hopefully for you to approve and allow us to move forward with that. Current plans have that being completed by the end of the year. And lastly is the county's new phone system. As you all are aware, we went through an RFP earlier in the year. We selected a vendor. We're working with them now to get everything programmed on the new system, make sure that everything will move over smoothly. We will then move forward with getting all of the phones deployed on everyone's desk. We'll move forward with providing training for everyone, and then we will set a day and a time to do the hard cutover from the old phone system to the new system. Current plans have that being completed by the end of the year as well. So to the slides. I know that we tend to get questions about the AS400, not looking at anyone in particular, but so I wanted to make sure that I touched upon that and let you know that we are actually phasing out the hourly IT position that supports the AS400. For those of you unaware, some years ago, our main programmer for the AS400 retired, but he stayed on in a limited capacity. We are actually at a point where we no longer have a need for that service. So we're continuing on until June 30th of next year, and then at that point we are ending that arrangement. To confuse you all with that last statement, next year we are buying a new AS400. So we, our current AS400 is end of life, and IBM is saying that if they want to continue supporting it, or every year that passes, they're going to give us less. And every year that passes, they're going to give us less assurance that they're actually going to be able to replace anything that fails. So we were pretty much in a situation where we had to move forward with a replacement. We do still have programs running on the AS400. The most notable one is our court management system. which I know the replacement is in front of you all. But we have multiple offices have other programs as well that they're still running on it. I believe Animal Control came to you guys recently asking for funding to get a new program. Once they get that implemented, they're going to migrate their program off the AS400 to the new program. There are other offices that have smaller programs run on AS400 as well. But again, by far and large, the court management system is the biggie. Next bullet point, the board, through ARPA, approved two-factor authentication a couple years ago. As of next year, those funds will start getting pulled from IT's CARF budget. And the remaining bullet points there are all projects that we had hoped to complete this year, but we're having to postpone to next year. So the countywide cybersecurity risk and vulnerability assessment, pretty much that is, we're hiring a company and we are going to pay them to hack us. So they're going to do everything they can to try to breach our network, and we're going to see if all of our safeguards and defenses are adequate and what they should be. Hopefully they will be. If they are not, they will provide all the information letting us know how they were able to get through our defenses. And then, of course, we would move forward very quickly with getting those holes patched and closed up. Network access storage, we're pretty much just running out of storage. You know, every office is just saving more and more files and data every day that goes on. Additionally, our network storage is starting to become the bottleneck for many things. So this new system is going to give us enough storage for right now and the immediate future, and it's going to give us the speeds we need. It's also going to come with some security features and functionality that we don't have with our current system. Cloud backup, as it says, is going to improve disaster recovery measures. Right now, we maintain multiple copies of all of our data throughout multiple buildings in the county, and even some data is secured on tape backup. And moving to the cloud is just the next step. There could be some natural disaster that hits us, a multitude of things, but just moving forward, it's just going to bring a lot more benefits, a lot more assurance, a lot more functionality, us saving backups to the cloud. And lastly is the email archival system. It's a common misconception that our email is archived because we use Microsoft. Microsoft, their stance is that they are an email provider, but they will not safeguard our data. So if something malicious goes through our network and wipes out all of our email, or if Microsoft themselves get breached or hacked and they wipe out all of our email, Microsoft is just going to say, you know, so well, oh well. So the email archival system is going to give us a duplicate copy, and it's also going to help largely whenever we have to perform email searches for FOIA. The tool we use now is very slow, very clunky, very limited, and we're getting more and more and more FOIA requests, so that is going to help us in that regard as well. That is pretty much all that I officially had, but I did want to go back to when I said the majority of the projects are ones that we are having to postpone. I hadn't planned on discussing this initially, but in reviewing the videos from the last 2 nights and hearing other department heads voice their concern, I felt that I need to as well. I am not asking for another position, but I am asking for increased wages. I have been speaking with admin services for the past few months regarding this. There are some pay discrepancies within our department. It's having some adverse effects on us. Since January, we've been down 2 positions. Since May, we've been down 4 positions. That's about 1/3 of our staff. I think that we would not be sitting at 4 vacancies if we were offering market rate compensation. And speaking with admin services, I provided multiple data points, including compensation from other local government entities, data from payscale.com, salary.com, glassdoor.com, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, every platform you can think of. For those of you unaware, pretty much you go to these platforms, select your job, your zip code, and it'll say, hey, this role in this area should be making this much. They pretty much all agreed with the Gallagher study that we had done 2 years ago that said IT is underpaid and needs to be better compensated. And I think we're just going to come to a point where we are losing staff and we're not going to be able to fill the position, or we're going to have to fill these positions with people who are lacking in experience and in competency, and having your IT department staff with people who are inexperienced and, I don't want to say incompetent, but that will be a recipe for disaster. And so even if we are somehow able to miraculously fill these 4 vacancies, I think it might be a short-lived win. I think someone might come in, and once they realize they can get more money, down the road or what have you, we're going to be in a similar position. And so I've also mentioned this to recruiters who've taken a look at some of our job descriptions and our pay, and they've said, yeah, this isn't exactly in line. You're asking for a lot. If you can't pay more, you need to create a new position and split the duties, and creating another position would obviously be more money. And I've been trying to personally headhunt people who I know would be perfect for the job. And the responses I'm getting are, MC, we'd love to work for the county, we'd love to work for you, but your pay is a good 10 to 15% under what it should be. And so last thing I want to do is have the guys who are still here get burnt out. And we're already at a point where we're having to tell officers and departments no, which is not a place where I like to be. And so, again, we have enough positions where if we can get those filled, we will be a well-oiled machine, but it's just, we just need to bump that compensation up so that we can both get people in those roles and, more importantly, be able to retain them in those positions. And so if there's anything I can provide in that regard, I don't know if I should go through Michelle or if or what have you, but feel free to let me know. Aside from that, that was all I had. Any questions? None at all.
Not seeing any. Oh, yeah, Jen.
Maybe I missed when you said it. How far below market rate are we?
We're a good, yeah, probably 10 to 15%.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that our wage scale for our IT positions is within market. The issue is that we need to hire not entry level, but we need to initial hire at the high end of our wage scale, which is just not current custom for the county. So that's one thing we may come back is we have the applicants and we have people who are qualified, but if we hired all these positions at the higher end, there might be a need for an additional funding. And I also think that we're in a bit of a tech saturated community. So we just have more competition for these tech people than the normal market locations. So while our wages aren't outrageously out of scale for the general market, you drop them into Champaign-Urbana and it just gets skewed a bit. So.
And yeah, just to add on that, so it was one position that I was looking at, and I don't think I sent that, but it was a identical position to what we had. And as Michelle mentioned, yes, our pay range was in line with the other one, but literally this is our pay range, and this was the pay range of the new job. And there was just a sliver where if we went to the very top of our pay scale, that would be at the bottom of this one. So yes, we're, there, but it's difficult.
Go ahead, Beth.
I will note that even at the university, we have issues with retention and hiring, and our pay scale is well above you guys's. And the other problem with retention is you'll get people, they will come, they will have you pay for all their training, they will get their 2 years of experience, they will update that resume, and they are gone. And you will be retraining and retraining and retraining, and that costs time, that costs money, certifications cost money, training classes cost money. It's going to be penny wise and pound foolish, trying to nickel and dime the salaries for that constant churn. It does not work.
Agreed at all.
Jenny, did you have a question? No. Okay. Thank you, MC.
Thank you.
Dana, you are up.
Hey, folks. So highlights for 2024. Our expenditures up 421,000. Can you hear me now? Just got to get closer. Okay. So we're up 421,000. That's really explainable. We've got a one-time increase to our budget for $250,000 for moving expenses from Brookins to the Bennett facility once it is complete, and also moving the public defender and the sheriff. That's been placed in our budget for safekeeping until that occurs. Additionally, wage increases for our 23.5 folks, as well as we've got utility rate increases we're looking at. Maintenance supplies costs, I think, went up about 20,000 from the previous year. So, all in all, I didn't think it was too bad, but the big hit is a one-timer. So, in terms of revenue increase, we've listed 166,000 and some change, and that's basically it's undervaluing our rent and our utility cost reimbursements from 2023 to make them more realistic. We're going to hit those numbers that you see for 2024 this year. So that's basically it.
Questions? I know you have a lot on your plate, Dana. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and it's going to be an exciting year next year for sure.
It will be a very exciting year, so looking forward to it. Thank you all.
Hi, Susan.
Well, let's see if the short people's mic works. Okay, really short people. There we go.
I
Can you all
think we
hear
need to
me?
arrange everybody in height order next year for presentations.
Exactly right, just like with the photograph. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being so attentive on what I know from my past experience on the board is a long series of meetings, learning a lot of stuff. I can tell you from listening to MC's presentation that I was on the board in 1980 when we approved the then new AS400 system. And we were so excited. It was the best thing IBM had. And we thought we're going to have that for 20 years and then we'll move on to the next thing. So it was 20 plus 20. But we really do use it every day. He's right about that. So I appreciate y'all's attentiveness to getting the system that we do need to have replaced. So I like to always start with bad news first because we'll just run right through it. I just came back from the Circuit Clerks Association annual meeting, and the challenges were one of our primary topics, as you might well foresee. I don't know exactly what this means to our revenue picture. All I can do is to tell you that on average, our county receives approximately $3.1 million in bond fees. About 10% of that is for my office, but the rest of it is for a lot of different offices and for a lot of different police agencies. So that is a number I can give you. What I can't tell you is exactly what some of these other things are going to mean in terms of revenue. And we're just going to have to share that information with you until we know more. And I can also tell you that nobody knows exactly what that revenue picture is, but as Clerk Ammons told you, the state is very good about asking us to do things and not so good about giving us the revenue with which to do it. One particular thing that I think we're all concerned with is the number of appeals that we anticipate may happen as a result of the change with our detention hearings. The law is saying that for folks who are not satisfied with what the judge's decision is in that regard, that they are entitled to a priority appeal, which I'm starting to think all of them are. But for this particular one, we have a 14-day window in which to make that happen. We can anticipate that, especially because this is all new to us, that this first year is going to probably give us about a 50% increase in the number of appeals that we have. You may also have heard from the court side on this that we don't have enough court reporters to do the transcripts we're going to have for these appeals. So this is definitely going to be a challenge for us, not just for the short term, but the long term as well. So let's just get through that bad news. We're going to go on to the next one. Fund changes. This to me is exciting because I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to budgets, since I've been looking at these since I was elected to the board in '78. And that's this. Stephanie Furtado, she doesn't remember this, but she gave us a good challenge in March, and that is to say, we need to make sure that the budgets are transparent for you all so that you can see that the expenditures are following the revenues. And so all of what we have really been doing since March is to talk to other counties to find out what they do with their budgets to do exactly that and to achieve that goal. So you saw in what we submitted to you, which we're not going to go through again tonight, that our budgets look different this time. There are two that have to stay the same. The automation fund is not only a fund that I control, but is also controlled by the circuit court. And so Judge Rosenbaum asked that we not do anything to that fund this year so that he can see how things go with the revenues and expenditures and to see if what I have predicted is accurate, which is that we're probably going to go to the negative in that fund this year. The second thing is with the e-citation fund. That's one we cannot change because by law, anything that we're doing to collect and do something for our new ticketing situation has to go for just that and only that. But for everything else, we are basically looking at a concept that says most of our funds will start looking like pass-through funds. So in other words, we're still going to collect the money. We're still going to be accountable to telling you what we collect. We're still going to tell you what the expenditures look like, but they're all going to start tracking through what we call the general fund so that you can see what we're getting and what we're spending. And frankly, that's necessary. Not only because, as I've told you, the automation fund, which we're not yet changing, is going to go to a negative, I think, but some of our other funds are already there. And so this may be a transition to what other counties have already started doing, and that is to say, with our revenue changes, we may need a little help as far as our expenditures are concerned. But you all can't really gauge what that help might be unless you know what we're taking in and what we're spending. So that really is the purpose of changing what we're trying to change. One thing you don't see in there yet is the request that I have made, patterning what MC has said. And that is, I'm not asking for more people, but what I am asking for is what I submitted to the Job Evaluation Committee, and that is to look at what we're paying my employees. It's a little bit more than what I said in my presentation for the JEC. In the last 12 months, I've lost 12 people to other county departments. Not jobs outside the county. These are county departments, the state's attorney's office and the circuit court. And that is where all 12 people have gone. I just lost somebody last week. That made number 12. And since I have 29 union employee positions, and the other 3 are myself, my chief deputy, and our executive assistant, that's a huge impact for us. That means we are in perpetual training mode. We are in perpetual hiring mode. That means that if you look at my staff today, we have, guess what, 12 people who have had less than a year's experience with my office, including somebody that's going to be starting on September 5th. So we're asking that we do what the Gallagher folks recommended 2 years ago, and that is to have internal county equity in these positions. And so in nauseating detail, what I submitted to the Job Evaluation Committee that's going to be meeting on September 20th regarding my proposal is to say, give us 1 grade upgrade in our 4 positions, job titles within the office. I have rewritten job descriptions because they haven't been done since 2004. That's a long time to not have that done. And we have tried to pattern those descriptions on what the other county offices are that we're losing the employees to, because honestly, those jobs are pretty much the same as the jobs we have. Somebody who is a clerk in my office can be a court clerk, and they can be a clerk in the state's attorney's office. So not only are we looking at the money, we're also looking at what do the people do. And you can't have a job description that's 20 years old and really judge that. So that's what we're submitting to the Job Content Committee, and I really appreciate them accommodating me by meeting on September 20th to discuss those issues. That's the day before the next county board meeting. And I know that's not the greatest timing, but the committee's been really busy doing exactly what you've heard from other department heads, and that is to look at some new positions and some wage increases. So that's why it looks kind of crazy this year, because it is kind of crazy this year. So the other thing that Tammy has been extremely helpful to us to do, and by the way, I want to echo what Clerk Ammon said there. This year, Tammy has worked really hard with us to not only accommodate what we've asked her to look at in terms of our new budgeting process, but also to look at other things that we can do to improve our office financial situation. And so it has been invaluable to us to have that assistance, particularly because she's trying to prepare to go on to an exciting new position. So I appreciate all the extra time she has put in for us to help us do this job. Because one specific thing she recommended is that very last point you see up on this slide, and that is to help us so that we can fund the court management software that we have now and get ready for what we anticipate might be a replacement. And I don't think that we could do both without her excellent suggestions, so I really appreciate that. And then finally, just as a reminder, we have not taken the money that you all have given us from ARP for granted, because it was a lifesaver. $125,000 helped us do some things I needed in physical improvements in the office, but also to help everybody get some new technology, which we desperately needed. But we haven't sat on that grant and done nothing else. So we actually received more than $300,000 from other grants that we applied for. And we're not going to stop there, because the technology needs continue to increase, and so does the need that we have to work with you all as partners to pay for what our needs are. Hopefully, the one thing the state will continue to do is to actually look at our continuing technology needs, because of what they have asked us to do a lot in these past 3 years in particular. And so we are on the lookout for more grant opportunities and for other sources of funding to help make this stuff happen. That means that we don't have to ask you all for other things that we might really need because of these other situations that we've talked about. So I just wanted to let you know what we have done and what we've used the money for. So I just want to conclude by thanking you for being so attentive and for staying this late to listen to what is a lot of detail. I appreciate it. Oops.
Questions?
Sorry.
JJ?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the information you have. My question actually is more for Michelle and Tammy. I've heard this Gallagher study referenced to several times. Is it available online that I could look at it, or could you get me a copy of it at some point when it's
I'll send you the
convenient?
link to the documents.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just resend it to the whole board.
Stephanie?
So yeah, I could see in your budget where in 2024, there's a lot of funds that have zero expenditures because you're rolling that into the general fund.
Right.
I guess I have two questions, and I'm assuming the answer to both of these is yes, but I just want to make sure. You have have you all talked with Mr. Bannock, because I know he did a copious amount of research over the last year on the administration of all of these funds to ensure that that methodology is okay with the statutory requirements of
We
these different
did.
funds? Okay.
We talked to Tammy and to Matt extensively to make sure that not only would the tracking work,
Right.
but also that we did have the statutory authority to do this. And so long as we keep track of what we're doing
Okay.
and how we're spending the money in compliance with the Clerks of the Court Act, then we can do this.
And I guess like the second half of that question then is, have you also spoken with the auditor's office that, so for when he has to assess the administration of those funds, that he's comfortable with that methodology?
Yes, we've been talking to Jill Stewart
Okay.
about the technical details of this primarily, and there are still some things we need to work out so that we make sure that our tracking makes them comfortable with this whole process. But she has also worked with us to do this.
The other thing is, I think that the administration of the Safety Act will fall most heavily on the revenue side in your
Yes.
shop. And none of us expect you to like pull water from stone if the revenue's not there, the revenue's not there. But I do think we might need to think of a methodology from which the board can hear once it's actually implemented.
Yes.
On a, I don't know, maybe like 6 months in or something like that. Like
Yes.
a joint presentation between finance and, like, so that we could see how it's going.
Yes.
Because I just don't want us to get to like October 2024 and we're like, oh, we need a 700,000, you know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah, like, I think a lot of it is we don't know right now. And I guess maybe this is maybe a question for you, but also for Tammy. Have we budgeted, how conservative, I guess I probably know the answer. How conservatively did you budget? Like, are what we looking at the numbers, the revenue side of numbers? Are we looking at like your doomsday scenario, optimist?
Yeah.
How did you try to arrive at this? Like, how realistic do you think
Let
the
me
revenue
answer
side
the
is?
first question about the tracking, because this is something we discussed specifically at the Clerks Association meeting. It's our intention to gather data from all the counties to say what has been the exact revenue loss that we have, because we do want to approach both the Supreme Court and the legislature about revenue replacement, but that's not a good idea until we have actual data to support this. Because it's one thing for us to say, these are our best estimates, and it's another thing to say, well, this is what has actually happened. And so I think there will be points along the way where all of us will be doing this, not only for you all, but also for hopefully the potential people that actually have the money to give us some money to address these issues. I will say the legislature has already decided to allocate additional funds to Public Defender's Office for what we know will be an additional burden on them. And that's because last year, as you remember, we talked about the fact that private attorneys are not going to be taking felony cases where there's no bond assignment available to them. And that is going to create an additional burden on the Public Defender's Office. They're going to have more cases. There's just no doubt about that. They handle a bunch of cases already, and you've heard Liz talk about that. But I think that is going to be another side effect of this. And so they've already thought about revenues for the Public Defender's Office, which makes sense. Now they need to think about the impact on some of the other county offices. So that's what our data collection is going to be for. And Tammy and Isak and I have talked about the revenue and what we should do to try to figure out what should be in the budget. It's not doomsday money because we're not exactly sure what that is. And so we were probably a little conservative in our revenue estimate.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we took out the 10% bond administration fee. It's completely removed. What's still uncertain is, that bond funding that would have been used to go towards fees and fines that we have no idea what that's going to look like. But no, I wouldn't say it's doomsday, but we did trim it back.
And that's why you see it down about 400,000, because that was our estimate about the bond fee and one other thing. But the additional waivers of fines and assessments, we just do not know how to estimate that. We just don't. The bond fee, at least we had good information on it from averages, but we don't have good estimates on the other stuff.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
So, I guess to understand what we're leaving behind, as a percentage, background, I was a public defender, and I know my clients did not pay their fines and costs. We had collections, they would even say, why is that fee there? I'm not going to pay it. And it went from there.
Right.
So as a percentage now of the things that we don't know how to estimate what's going away, how much of that is getting paid under the system we're leaving behind?
With what we have now, it's a good question. We already have some fee waivers in place, whether they are official statutory fee waivers or waivers that come because people are not making payments. But I will say, one thing that we have done to alleviate that in the past has been through our amnesty program. And people do take advantage of that because there are still collections happening on these fees and assessments. And what we will not be able to do is we will not be able to do collections on the things that are waived.
Okay.
And that really is one of the big impacts, I think, is that the collection efforts are going to go away. So that is the thing that's hard to estimate because our collections have changed some and they have increased in the past 2 years because Julia has been working with us to make that system, frankly, more effective. But that is going to change because that won't be there.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Tammy.
Susan, I don't think you mentioned anything about the fund balances that we're leaving in the special revenue funds for now.
Oh, yes. Good point. One of the things that Matt recommended to us is that we leave a small amount in our special funds in order to make sure that if something came up where there was a problem with cash flow, that we would have something in the fund to be able to handle that particular problem. We're not talking about thousands of dollars, but something minimal to make sure that until we see what the impact of this budget change is, that we're correctly doing what we need to do to make the transfers and the documentation. And that was his recommendation.
I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, we're not the only county doing it this way,
We are not.
correct? So just as another don't freak out point, we're not alone in this endeavor.
And the reason other counties are looking at this, and Kendall County started this, but there are other counties that have started doing this as well, mostly small and medium-sized counties like we are, because we're the ones that are feeling percentage-wise the loss of revenue, I think, the most. And so what I heard this weekend is a lot of the small counties have done something a little bit more drastic than we're doing, which is basically they've ditched all their special funds and they're saying, okay, we're going to have one revenue line, we're going to have one expenditure line, that's it. We're going to document what we need to document, but it doesn't look at all like ours. It's literally 2 lines. So we have also, by the way, just so you know, we've also talked to our outside auditor about this process too, because next year when we do the outside audit, this will be something that they'll be working with us on as well.
Further questions? Hearing none. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you all.
Folks, it's
Appreciate
8 o'clock. Is it the desire of the board to plow on through, or do you want to take a 5-minute break? What would you like to do?
It's just me and Tammy for the rest of them, so.
So you might want to temper your judgment then with that. All right, we'll keep going. Thank you. Administrative Services.
Just a reminder, we have the postage for the county in our line. It's not like we're mailing 10,000 letters a day from admin services. It's for the whole county. But the important thing I wanted to talk about, the HR generalist position, which is currently this year funded through ARPA. After the executive assistant retired, it seemed most fiscally responsible to just convert that position into the HR generalist position. So that's why the position request form, the total amount needed is only $12,000, which is just the salary difference between the two positions. And that would be the only budget increase that we're asking for to have this position permanently in the administrative services department. Yes.
I just really appreciate y'all coming up with a solution that didn't require us to carry that full load. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that special thank you to Megan, who picked up a good chunk of the executive assistant tasks. I picked up some of them, and some of them have been shifted to the other administrative assistant position we have. But I think with some just more efficient work plans, it's not an inappropriate workload. So,
Any other questions? Thank you. County Board.
Before I do county board, I want to mention a couple things about JANO since Susan just completed her presentation. We, in the 2024 budget, have $300,000 budgeted to pay JANO. $205,000 of that is for maintenance support, the software, and another $95,000 is for additional support services, report writing, changes that have to be made. It's a pretty large number of dollars that we are paying JANO. And a point of clarification about the recommendation that JANO be shifted over to Public Safety Sales Tax Fund is for my recommendation for fiscal year 2025, just to be clear. We do have, funding going back and forth between General Fund, Public Safety Sales Tax Fund, Capital Asset Replacement Fund. And I think that, really what's happening is Public Safety Sales Tax Fund is paying for part of JANO, and, circuit clerks' budgets were, multiple of the circuit clerks' budgets were paying for JANO because no one particular fund could afford it. It makes sense, I think, to get everything in one place and kind of clean that up in fiscal year 2025. So for the county board budget, the revenues are largely consistent of cable franchise and cable video service provider fees. And those have been declining year over year, I presume because of people switching over to streaming services. So the other thing that's received in there is a civic contribution related to our municipal electric aggregation program, which that was renewed and effective in February of this year. And that's totally dependent upon how many people are, signed up to use the program for their alternate electric supply. We get 0.001 cents per kilowatt hour. This budget pays for the county board chair salary, the per diems and mileage for county board, and also the county board's memberships. And funding for the former county administrator position, which was last held at $130,000, has been reallocated every year since we haven't had a county administrator for initiatives that the county board desires or indicates. At present, that allocation in this budget is $85,000 for personnel and $45,000 for non-personnel. So if there is a desire to change that, we would just need that direction from the county board. Just to speak to the $85,000 a little bit, we still are using a project manager for implementation. It has been for the ERP implementation, but now is switched over to the HR side of the ERP system. So that, and also $35,000 for a part-time grant writer. And I don't know. Yeah.
So typically how this goes is I would call up Mr. Goss and we would have a conversation about what do we think we should do with it, and then we would try to talk about it at this meeting and then going forward. So since this position since we've not had that administrator, just for those folks who are new on the board, we've essentially given that money for countywide projects that we didn't have internal ability to do. So when we were selling the nursing home, that sort of the person who oversaw that process, we paid for it out of this fund. With the staff that have, part-time staff that have implemented the ERP project for, I don't know now, 3 years, we've been paying for that fund, and we anticipate that we're going to continue to pay for it from there. But then a few years ago, I mean, eventually I think our dream is one day we have a full-time grant person. A few years ago, we felt like maybe we were leaving some opportunities for grants out on the table because we didn't have anybody to do that. So we ended up hiring some part-time staff. It ended up being a really big deal because Mary Ellen was the person who was the point person for our broadband project. So she did like all of the like relationships and helped those folks with the grants that they're working on and stuff. Mary Ellen has left us. She's gone to the Forest Preserve, I think. Somebody
Correct.
stole her. She was very talented, and she got stolen away from us. So the thought is we would still continue to like to have that there are grant opportunities that are out there, maybe some grant opportunities that could help us match some of the ARPA funds, and also that broadband project is still out there, and having somebody in the office who's sort of doing that work. And then 45,000 in non, we always want to leave some money in there. Sometimes we've used it for lawyers, for different things. I think when we, we're in a lawsuit with our previous executive, that's how we paid for our lawyer. So we want to have some, we don't want to put it all in personnel. We want to have some, so that if we have special projects that we want to do from the board, right, that we have that flexibility in category 3 funding. So that's sort of the breakdown. If y'all, I mean, that's a question that this is like the line of the budget that's ours. So like out of all the lines of the budget. So if, this is the kind of breakdown we came up with. But if folks have thoughts on that, like where that breakdown should be, we could have that conversation. But it's been about at this %, I think. This might be a little bit more in non-personnel
Right.
than we've had, but we also probably don't need as much money for the ERP as we've had in the past. It used to be, I think like the last couple years, it's been more like 100,000 and 35,000. We felt like maybe we could put a little, maybe we didn't need as much in personnel this time because that ERP project theoretically is rolling down. Although the other thing is if we do the JANO project, we might have to do something similar. I don't know, maybe by 2027 we'll get that grant writer, right? But if we do the JANO project and we have to hire a part-time implementer, this would probably be the most likely line that it comes from. We just use it for like special county-wide projects that nobody else's budget has the ability to carry.
That JANO project will be a full-time project manager,
Okay.
I would say.
Maybe we'll contribute to that. I don't know.
I just want to clarify too. So the grant coordinator position was never officially created through our official channels. So we've got that done. There'll be a recommendation to the policy committee as soon as I get some time to type it up. It's been through the JEC. So the position request form is for a full-time position, just so that we wouldn't have to go back and ask to change it someday in the future if we can afford a full-time grant coordinator. But this current funding request would cap we'd only pay $35,000 for this position for next year. So it would just be whatever hours we can get at whatever rate we end up having to pay.
So this particular budget is a new budget for fiscal year 2023 that we will also budget in 2024. And this is to pay for the debt service for the 2022 B bonds or the Bennett Administrative Center. So in this particular budget, this is just for that bond issue, but I wanted to point out with this graph that we have a debt certificate that is actually budgeted in the fiscal plan that is going to be paid off in fiscal year 2024. So it's about $183,000, and that's represented by that yellow portion of the first bar. So that will be $183,000 that will be freed up in the general fund in fiscal year 2025. The general county budget is the largest operating budget in the general fund, and this particular budget receives the majority of the county's general fund revenues, including property taxes and state shared revenues, which are our main sources of revenue. And the property tax growth in fiscal year 2025 is 6.25%. That is made up of 5% CPI and 1.5% new growth revenue based on new EAV added to the tax rolls. So you've heard me talk over the last couple of nights about the economy not performing as well as it has in the last couple of years in future fiscal years. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. First of all, for those of you who aren't aware, Champaign County is under PTEL, the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, which essentially means that we are not allowed to increase our property tax levy more than the actual CPI, and it's capped at 5%. So CPI for fiscal year 2024 was actually 6.5%. We cannot levy 6.5% because we are capped at 5%. So you can see on this, I had to break this out into 3 different tables, but essentially this is tracking back CPI all the way to 2010. You can see in 2023 and 2024, CPI capped at 5%. Never before these 2 fiscal years have we seen 5% in since, what is it, 1990? Is that when PTEL went into effect, I think?
96 is when PTEL
96?
went into effect.
Yeah, it's never been 5%. These are the only 2 years it's been 5%. But what I really want to point out is this is a 15-year period, and 8 of these 15 years, CPI was less than 2%. So many years, county employees got 2% wage increases, 3% wage increases, because that's what the county could afford. So part of what you are hearing tonight is years and years and years of county funding restrictions not allowing for wage growth, and that just has perpetuated and perpetuated. We have made a lot of progress, a lot of headway over the last couple of years. We have given, higher wage increases than the county has ever seen before, but it takes more than, 2 or 3 years to make up for 10 or more years of, lower wage increases. And so I thought I would also just give you an example. I ran a couple numbers today. So our total property tax levy growth is $2.56 million. If CPI weren't capped and the county board chose to actually levy for the full 6.5% increase, plus capture the additional new growth revenue that resulted from new property being added to the tax rolls, that would have been an additional $624,262 across all of the county's levy lines that we could have used for county purposes. The thing I really want you to understand from this example is if CPI were 1.5%, which is not unreasonable if you look at that chart, in many years it's 1.4, 1.9, 0.7, 0.8. 1.5% is kind of standard if you look at that chart. Then our levy would be $706,000 less. So when I talk about, being cautious about future fiscal years and ensuring that, we're not accustomed to these larger increases in revenue, this is what I'm talking about, because there's just limited growth when your revenue streams are restricted by statute.
If I could just take a moment, I want to thank you for that very eloquent description of the PTEL effect on Champaign County. I've talked about PTEL since I first got on the board, and in fact, some countywide electeds didn't even know what PTEL stood for at that time. And the impact is still there, and that's why we need to be as careful as we are with our dollars.
So the other major revenue stream is our sales tax revenues, and you heard an example from me last night about public safety sales tax. So I have that same example for you tonight, looking at the first quarter of I'm using our quarter cent because that's our largest, besides our public safety sales tax revenues, the quarter cent's the other very large revenue stream. The first quarter revenues this year, compared to the year ago period, were an increase of 7.3%. Second quarter, negative 0.7%, exact same drop in percentage in comparison to the second quarter of last fiscal year. So again, the effect of the feds raising the interest rate is, having the effect that they intended. The economy is at least reflecting in our sales taxes as slowing down. One of the things that I provided to you tonight is an redaction from an Illinois Municipal League publication that was recently put out. And I come from, my history is municipal government, so I still continue to read a lot on municipal government, and IML is an excellent source. They provide a lot of information that is relevant to county government. So if you remember when I presented the forecast, I showed this very same graph of the craziness that is public property replacement taxes, or PPRT. Now, normally when I show this graph prior to this year, I make it, there's not, the axis is a lot smaller, and that line that you see between 2015 and 2020, I make it go like this, because that's what the PPRT revenues do. You can't tell that from this, but I mean, they're so hard to budget for. And the state gives us estimates, and they're largely not right. And they're also based on the state's fiscal year, which is different than our fiscal year. So we don't have 6 months that we can use as from their estimates. But in 2022, there was this ginormous spike in PPRT revenues that everybody was like, what in the world is happening? And IDOR provided some explanations, but, I'm not an expert on PPRT revenues. They're supposed to be the experts. Well, IML was also perplexed because they provide estimates on their own. And so come to find out, the accounting software that IDOR was using was incorrectly allocating not just PPRT revenues, but some of the income tax revenues. So there has been a massive over-allocation of PPRT revenues, and you would never believe it, but the state wants their money back. So, so if you want to read more about it, you can read the, I spared you the whole article, but there's some of the highlights of the IML article. And this clawback is not just going to affect us in 2024, but it sounds like it's going to go at least through 2026 and maybe even as long as 2028. So there is a significant reduction in the budget for what is expected to happen in our PPRT revenues, and that is a $627,000 reduction. Now, I basically used the information that we received as an estimate from IDOR, but I also looked at what IML was saying they anticipated the decrease was going to be, because oftentimes that IDOR estimate is not exactly accurate. So I'm disclosing to you right now that income taxes and PPRT taxes are a little bit, I don't know. Income taxes, I am still projecting an increase in, and I'm actually using the number that the IML is providing as the estimate. It is a per capita based revenue stream, so it's basically the number that they are providing times our unincorporated area population, which is 30,055. So your next budget director can keep an eye on those two lines and see how right or wrong I was. For the expenditures in the general county budget, the largest expenditure is for the county's portion of health insurance for general fund employees. And you've heard us tell you that that is an almost 20% increase. So that translates to a pretty significant increase in this particular expenditure line. Also budgeted in the general county budget is transfers out, and those are transferred to highway to fund 50% of one of the mechanics who does a lot of the all of the work on our sheriff's vehicles and other county vehicles. And the largest portion of the transfer is to the capital asset replacement fund for the software equipment technology of the general county non-public safety sales tax departments. And also in this fund is a new revenue stream, the opioid funding. So at the end of fiscal year 2023, there's going to be $495,200 that is actually part of our fund balance, but it is reserved specifically for opioid purposes. And I know there's a task force that's been put together and is going to be providing direction for that funding, but I just want to make sure everyone is aware that the fund balance, that, you know, when you see that percentage of fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2023, almost 500,000 of that is really, you know, funding that is reserved for other purposes that is going to be going to opioid, what is the remediation, what's the right word there? Yeah, prevention and treatment. Also, I forgot to mention it on the debt service slide, but similar to the public safety sales tax debt service for the non-naked abatement bonds, we're required to pledge the debt service before we abate the bonds in the next fiscal year. So there will be a reserve for debt service amount of almost 1.5 million as a part of the general fund balance as well at the end of 2023. In the fiscal year 2024 budget, we have appropriated $586,859 for the opioid funding that I just talked about, and that also includes an additional 91 that includes the fund balance that I referred to at the end of fiscal year 2023, plus an additional $91,659 that we expect to receive in fiscal year 2024. For a total of $586,859. And the last budget of the night is American Rescue Plan Act, which Michelle is going to present.
Just really fast, since this is your last meeting that you are going to be presenting to us, I wanted to say working with you this past 5 years has been one of the great blessings of my life.
Oh. Well, so I didn't prepare anything, but I thought maybe I'd say something. This is really bittersweet for me. Oh gosh, I didn't know I was going to get that emotional. I have grown to love Champaign County, the people of Champaign County. I'm really excited about this new opportunity because it's going to let me serve Champaign County in a different way. But Michelle's told me that, you know, she still has all my contact information and my teams and everything. Yeah. You You know, this job has been a real blessing for me. I know, and I don't know, Lorraine would have been, is anybody other than Lorraine? Erin, were you on the board when I came? Diane? I know Deb Busey told board members at that time that I would grow into the position. And have I grown into there have been some really high highs and some really low lows. And I think, you know, in those low lows, one of the things that has kept me here is the support of the county board. I mean, there has been a lot of cycling, you know, of county board members since I've been here 8.5 years. But there's not been one board that hasn't been supportive of me. And there hasn't been one board that there haven't been people that I've made connections with and still kind of, you know, keep in contact with some of them. So I just want to say that it might have been a lot sooner that I might have been, you know, out of here if it hadn't been for the support of the county board. So I really appreciate that. And, you know, I really care about the county. Hence, one of the reasons that I wanted to give, you know, ample time. I know it's never enough, but ample time to allow a transition out. And for sure, we'll be available. You know, Stephanie has my cell phone number, and Steve. And so, yeah, the last thing I want to do is leave the county in a bad position. I'm still part of the county, right, as RPC. So I appreciate the support also that I have felt from you guys in saying we're really happy for you. You know, we hate to see you go, but no one's been ugly or mean about it. Like, I can't believe you're leaving. Everyone has been extremely supportive. So I appreciate that. Thank you for the event tonight. Thank you for the flowers. Thank you for the massage and the pedicure and all the stuff that I will hopefully get to use on my 2 days off that I'm taking.
I feel like that's very symbolic of the next couple of months of following that act while we get our new budget director. So
I did want to actually say something too. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just seeing Michelle's face. Michelle she's really tried to glean as much knowledge as she can from me. And, you know, I can tell she's passionate about Champaign County too. And frankly, she's going to have to fill in a little bit of gap. So extend her grace. She really has done an excellent job to try to learn as much as she possibly can these last few months. And I really appreciate that. Now she can cry.
I'm holding it for next week when we're actually like moving your stuff out of your office. So, okay, ARPA, another fun actual budget to talk about. So I think as we all know, everything is supposed to be spent by the end of 2024. There's a couple caveats to that. The big Garden Hills water project and the broadband projects are the main ones. We did budget, or I'm sorry, incorrect term. We did allocate to spend everything in 2024. And so next budget cycle, you may hear us talking about moving some of that money, and those are those reasons why. Kathy and I have already started the process of reaching out to some of the ARPA recipients who are not spending at the rate that was indicated in their budget, especially as the time frame that they have to spend the money continues to shorten and the amount of money that they've spent does not continue to grow. I am having the pretty uncomfortable and frank conversation with them of, are you actually even going to be able to spend this money in the time that you have left? Because if we need to reconfigure the allocation, let's talk about that now and not wait until, you know, late into next year. So I'm anticipating that by next spring and into the summer, we'll have pretty regular updates of where we think money's coming back and how much we think is coming back. I've also started a general list of internal county projects that I know we could fund when we need to turn that money around quickly. And I think, you know, some point in the future, we can talk about if we want to reopen this up to the community. Please don't tell people that we've done that. I'm saying that maybe we could talk about doing that next year. The spending, there is some spending for sure that you'll see in 2025, which is the payment to RPC for the actual management of the ARPA funds. I think those are like the main highlights so far of ARPA. Any questions?
I guess I'm trying to think of how to phrase my question. How the reauthorization will work and the process by which we decide, like, are we going to have to re-vote every time, or is there going to be some sort of like ranking of, well, we know this would be able to be done immediately and is beneficial, you're authorized to make that call? Like, how are we?
Well, I
moving
think that's
forward?
definitely
Yeah.
a decision that the board and the executive need to make. Like, if we want to say, here's the list of county projects, and as soon as money's available, just start funding them, or if you want to talk about it every single month and vote on it, like, I think we can, start having those conversations after the first of the year as to how we want to do that for sure. I mean, there is, at least about $1 million already to be reallocated that can wait until next year for sure. But like, we do need to have these conversations. There will be decisions to be made. So
I mean, I think just to be blunt, we're going to prioritize projects that can move expeditiously.
Yeah.
This is not ARPA related, but it's the end of the budget related. So I wanted to say this really fast. Tammy gave me an updated number. So where we were over budget at the beginning of this meeting was $615,289. After, if we add in $120,000 for the Veteran Affairs Committee, that puts us at $735,289 in revenue or expenditures above revenue. To give you a sense of that, this year, based on what we budgeted, we probably, Tammy's estimation, depending on end of year expenditures, will underspend our budget by $1.1 million. So that's for this year's budget. So if you take those two numbers and put them into conversation with each other, especially given some of the things that we heard about coming from the circuit clerk's office and all of that, that's a very tight, that's very, very tight, right? That's less than $400,000. So that said, I know I said that we're going to have that process. I wanted just to reiterate that process is that at the COW, we will go in a circle, because apparently I love circles, and everybody is going to have an opportunity to say the following sentence. I plan to prioritize any additional funding by, and then you could say how. You could say by saying, I think we should just go with what was budgeted. Or you could say by prioritizing the recruitment and retention of our current employees. Or by, I think if we were going to spend any more money, that I would see it going into law enforcement, right? Or I think we should stand pat, right? Whatever it is that and at the end of that, I will use my best teaching skills and try to summarize where we are. And maybe we'll be in agreement, right? And then on the full board will be your opportunity. I will not make you go in a circle. But if anybody wants to passionately advocate for some specific thing that is currently unfunded, right? Like, I think we should absolutely fund something that is currently on the unfunded list, whether it be personnel or the very few things that are not personnel. I think the two things that are not personnel are like the $50,000 for the scanner and the jury thing. That's, maybe it, right? That would be your opportunity to make that case so that hopefully when we go to that full board meeting in September, that we have a landscape to work with so that we're not starting the conversation from scratch. Does that seem like a good plan? All right.
To add to that, I think just about every department asks for equitability, if that's the right word, in salaries and or adding. If we could have and I know I'm not going to hold you down to a number, but if we get a general idea of the departments that requested either and or staff and dollar amount funding approximately, I think that'll tell the tale of the tape on a lot of our shortfall, because it actually could be greater than what you just said.
And to read it on that,
the biggest-
I do want us to also think about the fact that we don't have to solve all of the world's problems in 2024. What we might decide as a board is that in 2024, we're going to spend the year fully figuring out what that equitable funding would look like, but we want to keep money in abeyance so that we can implement it in 2025. I very strongly don't want to do any of this haphazardly.
I'll definitely compile the list for you, as long as, again, we're all in agreement that these are very flexible numbers. But I also just want to say that I do have a proposal for you on comprehensively dealing with the compression and just general low salary issues that we seem to have across the board for the county. And so I would really caution that we do not piecemeal that in this budget, and let me get an opportunity to give you the presentation and we talk about how we can do it comprehensively, because you really have to remember we really need to negotiate it into the new contracts is the biggest piece. Because if we start doing it here and there, or we even try to do something across the board, but it's not in the contracts, we have a mess, right? So I think we're all in agreement that it needs to be done. And I definitely know, I'm not saying what the department heads want to hear, but I do think we next year need to, let's fund the way to do it and work with a professional to get it into the contracts in a way that we can afford, that will also, give the employee retention and recruitment benefits that we're trying to get by increasing our rates. So, and then I also, just as a private individual who happens to work for the county, do want to advocate. I know it's like one of the least glamorous position requests, but the civil attorney is just so important. I talk to the state's attorney's office at least once a day, and usually never the same topic. So the value that they give us on what they protect us from, there's just no way to calculate. And so if, I just want to pull that one back up to the top, because again, I know it doesn't sound very exciting, and it's like kind of a hard one to even explain to a taxpayer why we need more lawyers. But in terms of value for the county, it is by far, it's an investment, and the return on that investment is just, immense as to what they provide for us in every single department. Not just what I talk to them about. So
They also save us money in terms of keeping us out of trouble that would cost the county additional dollars. And since it is not a bargaining unit, that may make it a little easier to deal with, because we don't have to touch any of the contracts. So just chiming in.
Any other ARPA questions?
Go ahead. Jeff.
It's not an ARPA question. Well, maybe I will have an ARPA question, just because, to help me in my knowledge. I thought the money had to be earmarked in 24, but there was spend through 26. Or is the spend to end in 26?
Yes, so it has to be allocated in 24. Okay. So the concern that we have is, if we have current allocations that we know aren't going to be able to spend it, let's reallocate it before the end of 24.
Thank you.
So we don't give it back to the federal government.
That's how I understood it. Okay.
So, for example, for say Macy and a lot of the programs that we did with the community violence money, a lot of them asked us for 3 years of funding, and we funded through 2025, with the understanding that if for some reason, what we find with a lot of these service agencies, it's really hard to get staff right now. And so if they cannot spend their full bore budget by the end of 2025, that means that we're not going to have to give money back to the feds, that they would have that extra year in order to spend down that money.
Okay,
right?
thanks.
And that's one of the reasons we did that. Also, we didn't have enough money to give everybody everything they wanted. That also made it kind of easier to fund multiple projects.
Yep, thank you. And then it would be helpful to me, maybe only to me, everyone else is a lot more smarter with numbers than I am as far as budget. It would be helpful to me if there was actually a list, because I'm not going to remember this, nor go back and figure out if there's 10 ads for each department wanting an attorney or an extra staff or extra salary or extra this, if there was actually a way to summarize that simply on an Excel spreadsheet, and then that would help me understand what I would choose as a priority, and then maybe help others understand to choose what they want as a priority.
Yeah, so I can definitely do that with the personnel stuff. And I also just started a list, and I've been working on it for a couple months, honestly, of all of the future costs that we know are coming. And so I'll put that together. So it may not have dollar figures attached to it, but it's just to give you a reminder. We know Jano's coming. We like all these things that we just know in the next 18 to 24, 36 months are going to be expenses that we're going to need to deal with. So.
To be clear, you do have that chart. It just doesn't have a couple of things. Yeah, you have it in your budget package. You have two charts. You have all of the personnel requests excepting the treasurer's request and the Veteran Affairs Committee request. You have all of the personnel new position requests on one chart, and then you have all of the new funding requests on a separate chart, and it indicates whether they had been, if they're represented in the budget or if they're not. So you do have both of those charts. And yes, so as you're thinking about your priorities, those are really the charts you should be basing your thoughts on, right? In addition to everything you've heard for the past 3 days.
And it's okay, Jeff. I asked for something on Monday that they had in that same packet already, so.
Well, not being the newest member of the board, but I could be the slowest member on the board. So anyway, thank you.
That's all, folks. We can now go home. Thank you, everybody.
Don't forget, if you have dishes and things next door, to grab them.